Hello, and welcome to the Woo is True podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Garitano. I like to refer to myself as a recovering academic and healthcare provider, and I now help other people develop their intuition and really come to terms with this idea of science and spirituality. I am a lover of both evidence and divine coincidence. So let's see if you're in the right place. Are you someone who's ever wondered how spirituality and science fit together? Maybe you've questioned what you learned through traditional religion, or you've had experiences that you know have a deeper meaning and you just aren't sure how to figure those out. If so, the Woo is True is for you. In this podcast, I want to make the practical mystical and the mystical practical, because I know there's a way to balance the two and learn from both. It doesn't have to be either or, it can be both and. Both practical and spiritual, both science and energy, both concrete and ethereal. So let's swap or for and dive into the woo. Welcome. In today's episode, I will be speaking with Evelyn Fuson. She is one of my clients, also has become a very dear friend, and you will just get to hear our unedited conversation around her intuition, development, a little bit about her past, and some of the religious conditioning that really held her back from listening to her inner knowing. So tune in, and I hope you enjoy. All right. Well, welcome, Evelyn. I am so excited to have you here today as we just dig into this discussion around you and your unique journey with your intuition. So I'll just get right to it and kind of ask you, what does intuition really mean to you?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I know that answer yet. And I think that's okay. I think the word intuition means maybe an inner knowing, something that maybe can't be directly articulated at times, but yeah, it's just an internal knowing that
hmm
you maybe don't have any rhyme or reason. There's no other contributing factors. You just know. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. That's perfect. I love it because it's really succinct. Like you said, well, I'm still leaning into it on some level, but then you also are pretty clear on what it means to you right now.
Mm.
So I'd love for you just to share a little bit about your own journey with intuition, or what has really made you curious in terms of developing your intuition.
Yeah. I think over the last few years, especially, I've really been on a very spiritual journey. I grew up as a pastor's kid in a Southern Baptist tradition. Um, and it was not exactly friendly to intuition. Not in the way I think um that I've come to understand intuition. Um, and so through this journey of almost breaking down my history and my background and really starting to there was almost a breakup I had at one point with the church. Nothing was wrong inherently. It was just I felt internally um I felt like I needed to take some space, and I had really been in it, not only in it attending, in it as a lifestyle, in it as a vocation. Right out of college, I went and I served as a campus pastor. Um, and then from there, I worked for a church. And then when that commitment was over, all I really felt was that I needed to take space and time. And there wasn't a rhyme or reason for why. I just felt, and maybe that's not entirely true either. There were parts and pieces too, subconscious maybe. I had really, really struggled with being a part of or even leading in a place that had become so predominantly for what it was against and not what it was for. And a big piece of my whole entire life, I feel, has been to sit with people and make their human experience okay. Like to
Mhm.
be messy, to be this anything but linear process that it is
Mhm.
of discovery, of emotion, all of these things. And I began to become aware as I took more time with myself that I had really bought into a lot of, and this is only in hindsight, I can even say it because even it feels very ethereal some at some points too. I'm still in a very like abstract place where it's flowing
Mhm.
and but what I feel like I started to realize or understand is that at some point I had gave away my power to the institutions that exist around me, looking for voices outside of me to trust instead of looking inward to trust. And there existed this tension. I've always been pretty confident in myself. And so I feel like it didn't really rub up against me much because even within those confines, I was still a little bit of a rebel, but never still fully true to myself. Not really. And so over the last few years, especially the last year, and really too, I lost my dad in 2020, which was a huge identity piece that shifted for me too. And I call it a dance with grief. It was really my first
Mhm.
um, brush with
Mhm.
with a relationship that was so foundational, best friend, and there were ramifications beyond that that really allowed me also to break open in some ways, in some really beautiful, hard ways. And so over the last 2 years, really, and it probably also came from a coach. I had a business coach who even said to me, she said, I was like talking through the spiel. She stopped me and she was like, listen, stop talking. She said, I've been working with you for years and you keep talking about being a pastor's kid. She was like, what would it look like to just be Evelyn? And I was like, I'm going to need a minute. That was in early 2020 because it really did radically break into my life in the most beautiful way. And I really started sitting with that. What would it look like to just be Evelyn? And then as I began to just take that time and that space, the journey of that intuition of growing that trust internally of that inner knowing has been enhanced. And then I started down this trek too of like looking into human design, which actually led me
Mhm.
to you. And
Yes.
and it and I don't know if I shared this with you, Nicole, but for at least I was in a mastermind in 2020 and when I left that experience, I knew that I wanted to work more like with a one-to-one coach, but I just wasn't
Mhm.
sure who, I wasn't sure what it was going to look like. And I had reached or had listed, asked for people to refer me
Mhm.
to people who were familiar with human design. And somebody tagged you in that post. And the minute I saw your picture,
Mhm.
I immediately trusted you, which is a very big deal for me because I am a really strong leader in myself too. And trust usually has to be earned. But internally too, I knew. I'm like, I know I'm supposed to know this woman. And it's just felt continually, constantly like coming home
Mhm.
over and over and over again. And so I get emotional because it's so powerful.
Oh, I know you're gonna make me emotional.
Well, I feel like it's all over the map
Yeah.
my journey here. I because it's
Yeah.
still something too I think I'm learning and dancing with too. And I'm just so grateful um, because I didn't know. until the last few years how much I had silenced myself, and still in some ways, there is fear that comes up for me in being more vocal around where I find myself because my community has been built around this identity that has greatly shifted, at least as far as people can understand it at the level of consciousness that they're at.
Mm.
And so it's still a great journey of growth for me, but so powerful. So it's kind of where I sit. I still sit in this place of growth and curiosity, so
Mm.
curious. And we just wrapped up, you know, I think what ended up being it was 8 weeks? Was it 9 weeks? 8
I think it
weeks?
ended up being 7 because I added an extra weekend.
Yes. Well, when even we wrapped up that experience, um, that allowed, again, space to explore and
Mhm.
space to come beside and um and it's been the most beautiful um collective kind of experience for me to go internally and with in that safe space that you created too.
Mm. Well, thank you. Thank you. And there's so many like beautiful things that you said in that. And so the first thing I really want to bring up is like I'm a big believer in divine connections, right? Like I trust God puts the right people in my life at the right time. And I feel like I felt very much immediately connected to you too, especially when we like first just started chatting. I know you had to do the initial reach out, but I was like, wow, I just feel like I've known her for a long time. And then even when we got on our first call just to meet each other, I felt like we could have talked forever. Um, and we definitely know that to be true now because we go back and forth in Messenger and have conversations. And there's just so many similarities. And I feel like our hearts are so aligned. And I know we're moving into a time now where it really is about heart to heart alignment with other women, you know what I mean? With the people that were meant to do bigger work in the world with. And that work looks so much different than the work we were conditioned, right, to do by society. And so for me, like even hearing you say that, it's like, I know this is just the beginning of everything we're meant to do together. So it feels so exciting, right? Like there's so much expansiveness and openness just in that. And also that curiosity piece is so key. That's the one thing I probably tout a lot, like stay curious, stay curious, stay curious, because so many times we get so cynical, right? Like we're taught to be more cynical, we're taught not to trust, unless it's certain, like you said, outer institutions or people in authority. Um, and that conditioning has just built and built and built, to the point where we've almost blocked the heart to heart connection that really is at the foundation of how we're supposed to interact with each other. So I feel like, in the circles I'm in and the people that I work with, like we are rediscovering that. We're rediscovering what it looks like to be in heart to heart connection and really truly like supporting each other in ways that maybe other people can't even fathom because they just haven't been able to experience it for themselves. So the other thing that I would love for you to speak a little bit to is that whole idea of reconciling religion with spirituality and intuition. Um, you spoke a little bit, to like what that's looked like for you. I feel like also with your experience in terms of leadership within the church organization, being raised in that, you'll probably just have some pearls of wisdom for anyone else that's in that tension and in that struggle of trying to reconcile the two.
Yeah. Well, I think that curiosity remains one of the biggest parts of that journey too. Um, because and I think also time. And the reason I say curiosity and time is curiosity because when you start really leaning in to the questions that you have, not only for the world around you, but for the world within you, um, I think we are led, like divinely led,
Mhm.
back to just capital T truth. Like, I think it happens. I think it exists. I think it's written into our DNA almost.
Mhm.
And so for the curiosity and then the time piece, something that I'm still working on um deconditioning from is this belief that to question means punishment, it means hell, it means that because I have questions or because I'm in the seeking place, that my eternity is at stake. And that is a huge weight to carry around. Um,
Mhm.
and even with my own background, I focused within church leadership more on discipleship, turning inward for people who were already engaged instead of evangelism. Evangelism has
Mhm.
never made a whole lot of sense to me. Um, and I have some horrible like experiences being in that environment. Really, it really taking a toll because um, it just, from a personal standpoint, doesn't make a lot of sense. I understand how it's been packaged and sold the way that it has, and that might feel really cheap too if you're listening and you hear me saying that. Like, I hope what you don't hear me do is cheapen the gospel. I'm not trying to cheapen it, and I'm not trying to dissuade people from it, but I am trying to encourage that questioning in that time. And I believe that regardless of what you believe around how we got here, or source energy, divine spirit, God, whatever that looks like, I do believe that the undercurrent is love. I believe that. I think that everything comes back to love. And I don't believe that you have to live in fear of losing that love. I actually think that's what causes the most harmful disconnection from ourselves, from the other people in our life, from the communities that we're in. If you really, really look at what the root of all of that is, it's that fear of losing that love and that connection that is always rightfully yours, always. And I do believe that you can find that in the Bible and you can find it in other teaching. I think it's interwoven in life, like I said, in our DNA. And through the example of Jesus, like, talk about some radical ways of loving people in that time and place. Um, but I think there's just a lot of reconciling that has to happen in this journey. And so allowing yourself that curiosity and time is
Mhm.
probably what I would say has been, still something I'm adopting, still something I'm giving myself permission to do. That change and questioning is a gradual process. And then that piece of fear too, like, they're really early on when I really felt like I was falling off the bandwagon, so to speak. I I was alarmed because my family of origin, both sides, deeply steeped in the church, both of them, deacons, pastors, ministers, generationally. And so to step out of that paradigm, it's not just like I'm walking away from something that was partial. It was deeply cornerstone to identity fabric woven, like, generationally for me.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's been a kind of, like I said earlier, coming home, but it's almost a re-knowing of something that I already inherently knew, but because I've been so saturated in the world and the culture that we're in, that I had to come back to it. I had to be pulled back to it. And I will say that doing this internal work and I didn't speak to this. I mean, I'm a life and mindset coach. I've been working with people professionally, like taking people's money to work with them since 2015. And only now, this year, can I say that, and I feel like they had a great coach in me, but only now in this place of this compassionate work that I've been doing of recovering that, of loving parts of myself that feel unknown or parts of myself that I rejected, can I say that I can actually love more fully than I've ever been able to in my life. And that's a really profound gift. Um, but there still is some of that internal drama that happens because it will be misunderstood by
Mhm.
family of origin and communities that I've come out of. And so, where I currently sit, too, if you're in this space, is trying to articulate the bridge between the two because I really feel a responsibility here. As much as I wish I didn't, because it would be so much easier. You know, you and I discussed a little bit of that, like through Facebook
Mhm.
Messenger, just like we
Yeah.
never thought that we'd be at this precipice in some ways. And
Mhm.
I for sure didn't. I for sure never thought I would be sitting in the seat that I'm in. And the girl that I was 5 years ago would um, just not even know how I got to be where I am, which I think is a great sign of growth.
Mhm.
And I may have said this to you too, but late as of late too, I come to this place of tears repeatedly, not
Mhm.
again out of sadness, but out of deep gratitude for being here
Mhm.
because I have fought to become this woman. And
Yes.
so, long answer to your question.
No, no, it's perfect. And you have, like, it's beautiful for you to be able to honor yourself too and say, like, I have fought to be here in this position. And you bring up, like, just listening to you, even, there's so many great elements in there, starting with, you know, when you're talking about the church and just like the confines of that. One thing that was really coming through for me listening to you is there's so much in interpretation. Right? So, I'm very much like you, like, I think the Bible's great. I think there's wonderful stories in there. I also very much know they're all open to interpretation. And one thing we're learning more and more about is that certain stories were chosen. Everyone that wrote a story, for the most part, had to be male, except for the few women we do see, you know what I mean, inside the Bible. And so we are learning that perhaps we've gotten a skewed version um, of what was documented. And I think that's really important for people to hear right now, especially if they're in this like trying to reconcile and they're consuming information. And then, like you said, they're looking at their family or social groups, and they really have been like ingrained in their church and have been like very astute in their religious studies growing up, and that was part of what was expected of them. It can feel like almost shameful, or you almost might feel guilty when you discover these new things or you're even questioning. Some people are taught not to even question. And so I feel like what the way you described it and what your journeys look like is such a like beautiful natural way to approach it. It's also so evident, like even when you were talking about the work you did in the church, you were already working heart to heart, you know what I mean, with the people. Not some, maybe not as intentionally as you're thinking about it now, but it seems like it's very much like a natural part of who you are. And I know that to be true about you. However, just hearing you say it and describing what you did, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that was just her heart opening up to everyone that she wanted to impact in the messiness, you know what I mean, and the feeling understood, feeling seen. So in so many ways, it's like you've always on some level been living this purpose of this heart to heart connection. You're just seeing it and you're becoming aware of it in a whole new way now. And that's amazing in and of itself. And so awareness, then it kind of brings me to that awareness piece. What you've just described to us is really like your journey of growing awareness of yourself, of others, of these structures, that were around you, of that conditioning that was around you. And so, you know me, I could talk about the generational piece all day long. Like that could be a whole nother separate podcast. However, I want to point out, because I think this could be important to other people listening that really identify with your story, that for you having this recognition, this journey, like you really are healing generational lines on both sides of your family. And so it would not be a far stretch to say other people on both sides generationally have gone through similar experiences, but maybe were never able to fully express it, right? Or they had beliefs and they had to stifle them. And you're actually coming through now, stepping into this place where you're going to heal that for both sides of your family. And then the generations moving forward won't have to be in that conflict and that tension of, do I have to adhere to this over here, or can I be fully expressed? You know what I mean? In and of myself. And I feel like your tears too, they come from that place of gratitude, because you know that. I feel like they're also like the tears for those that came before you. Like you're releasing the pent up emotions they had, the fear, the anxiety, the guilt, the shame, all the things. You're finally able to like release that through the work that you're doing. And so that's really big work in and of itself, when we can go back in and actually heal at that epigenetic, right? DNA level. And that might be a lot for people listening right now to take in. So we'll definitely do another podcast around that. But for me, that's very much the physical reality, like in our physical body, along with the spiritual healing that takes place. We see these transitions and we feel them, right? You're feeling it in your body as you're doing the spiritual work. And so that's the evidence sometimes that people need. Or when they can't understand the tears, that's the explanation that they need to make sense of what's going on. So I just love the way you were able to articulate that, you know what I mean, from your point of view, but it ties in all these like great teaching pieces, that are very important, I think, for the larger audience to understand. Um, so with that being said, since you did just go through the intuitive formula experience, I'd love for you just to share like what was like one of your biggest takeaways, and then maybe just share a little bit about some of the shifts you saw or felt actually during the program itself.
Yeah. I think one of my biggest takeaways was actually early on, because it was really interesting. Again, life and mindset is my work. And we did some guided meditation to begin. And
Mhm.
I was seeing all of these voices arise for me, judging myself for my imagination and putting myself down. Which again is, I'm like, I don't, this is so fascinating because it's always like out of my body, seeing it happen in real time. And one of the things that was really, really beautiful in that too was recognizing, okay, this is a new skill. I'm feeling awkward. I'm feeling like, I could be wrong in this space, or who knows if it means anything. And I was almost discrediting my internal world, my imagination, which is very, very in alignment with what we're taught in our culture, that your dreams, your ambitions, your imagination are fanciful places. Um, that, that's nice that you feel that way. But what do you need to do in the real world? And what is interesting too, because if anyone was coming to me with those, I'd be like, that's not true. And you know it. I'm going to knock each one down with you. Um, because I really like anything that limits somebody from their freedom is something I'm against. Um, so seeing that in real time, but then being reminded too, in that such a, it was such essence is the word that keeps coming and popping into my awareness. Like the essence of that experience, being reminded that my imagination is actually the most true thing, because our real world outside of us had to exist first as an idea, as a thought, um, as a creative experience. And it really, really continued to sharpen, again, my resolve almost to really, really take it seriously, the work that we've been doing, because um, it's the realest work we can do. And so I think that for me was still something that I'm like, yeah, this is what you preach every day. Now you're having to live it as you come up against some of these edges, or areas that maybe you were taught were unsafe. Again, interpretation. I love that you highlight so many different interpretations. And so that's something really that has come forward with me. I will say too, right before we started our work together, I had a contract that I'd had for several years ended. And it, I was coaching for another program, and it was a pretty big chunk of income. And even before I stepped into your program, I hadn't replaced that income. And the only piece that I knew though was, and I remember talking to my partner Serge about this. I was like, I'm not supposed to go look for anything else right now. Like, what I'm supposed to do right now is focus, do this work with Nicole, and I'll figure it out. Like, or it'll figure itself out. That is the truth. Cause normally too, I'm a doer. I'm like, well, we can go do this side hustle over here. We could pull this right
Mhm.
here. But I was like, no, I deserve this time. I deserve the focus and intention, and I'll figure it out if like things go haywire or whatever. And what I want to say, and the reason I bring that up is because as we sit here now in July, I'm on track to have my biggest month ever in my business to date.
Yay!
And and it has come from the space and time that we shared and that I allowed myself. And also, I created a very small group hybrid program that came from the most just simple overflow. And it's just been a really beautiful, again, witnessing of myself to go in and do it, and to be present. And like, there was one time I think where we had a group call and I had a friend ask for time, and I was almost like, well, there's a recording. And I was like, no, no, this is my priority. And the other person even had to shift their time. It worked out anyway. I didn't have
Yeah.
to sacrifice either one. But
Mhm.
um yeah, I think there was a second question you asked me, but I forget what it is. Um but it has been such a beautiful experience, because what I love about the way that you teach is that you do bring a lot of teaching into the mix, but you create safety for questions. You create and you always open yourself up to be reached outside of the group if there's something, because something coming up that feels very intimate, and you recognize that the work is very intimate. So that too, I think, is a testament to what a powerful, I know you call yourself a facilitator, which to me I love too, because I don't always actually resonate with the term coach myself, because I don't know
Mhm.
that ultimately is what I'm doing. um,
Mhm.
I ultimately feel a lot more like a shepherd, I think, which is in line with a lot of what I was feeling called and led to do. It just looks vastly different than how
Mhm.
I imagined it would. But at the same time, I'm so grateful because my soul literally has been able to expand, and breathe and connect. And earlier on too, what's so interesting is you're talking about heart to heart,
Mhm.
what I had been discounting. And as someone who's always been in leadership and my family's been in leadership, is recognizing too that, and it's something I feel like I couldn't exactly articulate, but something that I'm hyper aware of is that most people are disconnected from themselves. So it's hard for them to connect on a heart level with other people because they're not even willing to sit with themselves. And I would go so far to say that leadership, at least the paradigm that I think is dying, the old paradigm said, I have to do this myself. I can't show you any weakness. Showing you tears, showing you struggle is a weakness. It is something that will make you feel like I'm incapable of leading you, and therefore I can't. And very like to the point, very, we don't talk about anything else but the job at hand. And I think what we're really, hopefully, really leaning in and toward is recognizing that until we connect to our own hearts, we cannot connect fully and capably with others, and especially in leadership. There has been such a disconnect between like, how are you actually doing? How do you actually feel? At least in the Western world, I can't speak for everywhere, but that's been my experience, and something that I'm continuing like to kind of bump my head up against and say, okay, how do we come alongside and heal and change the paradigm and shift that? And
Mhm.
ultimately, I think that's probably why we connect so well, because I feel
Yeah.
like you're in a similar space.
Yes. I love it. So first, I'm celebrating you with your best month
Thank
ever
you.
in your business. Yay,
Mm.
that makes my day.
Yes.
I'll feed off that energy for a while. That's amazing. That's amazing. And oh my gosh, you shared so much goodness in all of that. And you did hit the nail on the head because one of the main reasons I created the program was really you have to get to know yourself again and love yourself again before your intuition is going to naturally flow. And you're right, before you can go out and use that intuition in the world, right? In all the ways the information's coming in. So that is really a key part of it. I feel like week to week is really going deep, right? And understanding yourself in a new way. It's like coming home almost to the person that you've always wanted to be, like really truly to your authentic self. So I love that you highlighted that. And oh my gosh, I mean, I don't know, but that would be like the best, like everything you just said, like the best testimonial um, ever. You know what I mean? When we get right down to it. So you did really answer the full question because it was really like, what are your takeaways and where did you see shifts? And I feel like everything you described there covered both of those. So I'd love to know, what would you tell other people out there that are thinking about doing the intuitive formula experience? Maybe they're on the fence. Maybe they want to do it in a future round. What would you tell them?
Well, before I answer that question,
Hmm.
I remember too. So, like, one of the reasons, and hopefully this is bolstering the answer that I'm going to give anyway.
Hmm.
For several years, hmm, probably 2016 up until 2022, um, I felt floundering in my business. I felt
Hmm.
the internal awareness, or the message I kept feeling was wait, wait, wait. But then towards the beginning of 2022, what I felt like was I was just craving me, time with me. And I fought in some weird ways to not honor that. I still don't know what that's about. Um, but um, but really and truly, this work and the time and space with ourselves, um, like I said, is the most important work we can do. Why? Because until we know who we are, how can we properly set boundaries? How can we even know what we want to invest in? How can we even know who we are, what we want
Hmm.
from life, what we want from a partnership, what we want from the world? If you're creating a business, how can you create offers? You can't. I mean, you can physically create them, you can make them, but the ultimate part too, I think the disconnect is what we've been taught, is that achievement is what we're after. And that's really not the truth. Achievement was never the problem. As a woman, too, if you're listening, it's never your problem. I can tell you that right now. I have never met a woman who had a problem with achieving anything that she wanted. Achievement is not the issue, fulfillment is. And until we bridge the two, until we bridge that internal space and actually uncover, remember, re-know, recognition is just recognition, re-knowing, until we come back to that internal truth of who we are, and find healing and acceptance in those places that we've tried to run away from. um, we will continue to spin in circles. We will continue to have a life, but not to the full. Not really and truly. And so, if you're on the fence, if you're considering the program, first of all, check in with your body. If you had, and I have a business coach too, who always said this, like, if I have $20 million in the bank right now, what's my answer? Because most of the time, our rational brain gives us all of these reasons why we shouldn't invest in something that we want because it's risky, don't have enough money to cover it, whatever else. But I truly believe that you you can create, find, you are resourceful, you can find the funding. Usually it's a money issue. If it's time, again, you have incredible incredible ways that you circumvent yourself from doing things that you know you should do. Like I said earlier, I did some creative things that we don't have to talk about right now, to escape what I knew what I needed to do. So if you're feeling like this program is for you, um, then I would make it happen. And even if it's, so here's the thing too, a lot of people will turn down opportunities before they even know the investment because they start limiting themselves, or they even have a conversation. So the first thing I would tell you to do is talk to Nicole, because any coach, any healer out there usually is going to be willing to work with you, not give you something for free, but if you're there and you want to put in the work, trust me, we want to be part of it. We want and desire clients who want to thrive in their life. So, if this is something that you feel like you're being drawn to, you're curious about, sit with it, ask questions, get to know it, and really feel into your body. If it feels really super expanded when you think about the possibility, great. If you're feeling contracted, maybe it's not the right time. But know this, that every offer that comes your way from any practitioner may never be offered again. So that's another way to think about it. If this was never offered again, and or if this was never offered again at this price point, are you going to be bummed that you missed it? That's another indicator. So if you're sitting on the fence, like, I'd really check in with yourself. I trust, I do trust that you know your answer already. I think we always know. So if it's just an issue of confidence, or if it's an issue of like you're feeling a little afraid or intimidated, like, talk to Nicole. She'll make it super easy. She's going to sit beside with you in the decision, no pressure. Um, and and it's going to be an amazing experience, life changing, foundational, groundbreaking.
I love it. I love it. And it's so true. Yes, any of us in these spaces, we do really want to help and serve. Like we just talked about all this heart to heart, you know what I mean? Connection. And so for me, that really is what it's about. So you articulated that so well. So as we wrap up, what I'd really love to ask you is sitting here right now at this exact time, in terms of your identity, who is Evelyn today as we talk to her?
Hmm, that's an interesting question. I've really been thinking about, you know, the word that's been coming up for me a lot lately is mother.
Mm,
And it's not a word like, it's actually not a word that I felt super comfortable with or connected to growing up, as far as the relationship dynamic with my own mother. But for whatever reason, And actually, I had a job several years ago where they called me mother host. I worked at Cheesecake Factory and I was much older than a lot of the other women. And they knew I'd protect them. They knew I was like loving on them, trying to coach them through how to hold themselves and hold their own boundaries with corporate greed, et cetera, et cetera. Um, or even working with the public, which can be tricky.
Yeah.
Um, so really and truly, I feel so nurtured in myself that I feel like I was always been nurturing, but I'm giving from a place now that is nurtured too. So
Mhm.
I feel, and I, like we talked about, I cry all the time right now, which is great. It's just an overflow. I'm so grateful for my life, for each part that I've cultivated, that I've stripped back, and said, no, this doesn't fit. It's not me. It's not me anymore. Um, and Yeah, so I know it's a really strange answer. It's not one I ever expected to give. But I really feel, yeah, and in the same piece too, the experiences that I feel like that aren't yet realized almost feel like a womb in some
Mhm.
ways. And
Yeah.
so that's what I keep coming back to. Mother.
Yes.
So, yeah, and I like I said, don't have kids, don't know that I want them. I feel like I'm supposed to mother in a different way, I think. So,
Yeah. Well, it's really beautiful because you're in that heart to heart space right now. So, of course, mother is what's coming up as your identity, and you're birthing all these new things into
mhm.
your world, and creating something new for all of those around you. So I think you are right on target with your identity. And I am so grateful for you, for our connection, for the time you spent here with me today. Thank you so much for being here and having this discussion.
Well, as I've conveyed and will continue to convey, um, the gratitude is more than mutual. I'm so, so beyond grateful for your own work in yourself and your own journey in overcoming some of the things that you have had to face in order to be able to hold the space and the container that I was able to enter, and that you will continue doing this work because it's so important. So,
Oh, well, thank you. I received that. It means so much to me. And watch out, world, because Evelyn and I are not done yet.
right, we're
We will
just
be
getting
coming
started.
at you. That's right. Just getting started. And for everybody that's listening today, if you want to learn more about Evelyn and her business, you can visit the show notes. I will be sure to have all of that goodness in there so you can feel free to connect with her as well. Thanks for filling your ears with possibility today. You can find all the resources shared in today's episode in the show notes or description, depending on which platform you are tuning in from. Until next time, remember your understanding starts inside of you. So stay true to your woo.